warm introduction, and thank you very much to the participants for joining this session. And thank you very much to Mr. Stephen for extending the invitation. Really feel privileged and honored to be part of this conversation. I wouldn't consider myself a guru. What I would just say is that I'm a lifelong learner, and every day brings new experiences which can either validate your previous knowledge or bring with it new lessons to use in the future state. So in terms of the presentation, I'll just cover some thoughts, maybe for 10, 15 minutes. I just want to put a disclaimer across that these are purely my opinions and my reflection on my experience and learnings. And then after that, we can have a conversation around specific topics or areas which, if I've got the knowledge and experience in that field, I can definitely share my thoughts and opinion. And if that's okay, Mr. Moderator, I can proceed.
Yes, you can proceed. I think Joseph has lost his. No. You can proceed.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. So I'll just cover some thoughts around how I view a business and the business idea, particularly in the context of the modern world, and how key components intersect, and how, as an entrepreneur and an innovator, you can begin to combine these forces for you to create value, not only for your shareholders or your partners, but also the community that you serve. So I'm going to cover about 4 key areas, 4 key streams of thoughts, and then, of course, try to connect it into how that plays into the financial sector, and how possibly finances and the financial sector looks at business ideas. So I think point 1 is starting off from my sitting room. So if my family is talking in the background, just bear with me. I'll try my best to ensure that at least the delivery is consistent. So when you look at the concept of the business idea, the way I look at it, and you could have different ways of defining what a business idea is. One of to look at a business idea is that a business idea is created by an asymmetry, either in information or resources. And when that asymmetry is created, there's usually a deficit or lack of information or resources, and there's usually a surplus of information and resources. And when you have a deficit of resources or information, then you clearly have got a problem to execute. And when you've got a surplus of information or resources, then you potentially are in a place where you've got a solution. Now, a business comes at the intersection of those 2 aspects and provides value to both the parties who've got a deficit and the parties who've got a surplus. So just to bring it home, if I look at banking and financial services, we work at an intersection of where people have got excess funds, who are your depositors, to people who've got a funding deficit, who are your borrowers, and you facilitate that process of transferring funds from the savers to the depositors through loans, and create value for both parties in terms of investments opportunities and financing on the other end. So we've got entrepreneurs here who are investing in the fashion space or in the marketing and media communications. Again, there you're feeding, you're bringing balance to the equation, whereby you've got either a surplus of knowledge or resources or toolkits, and we've got businesses who may not be able to have expertise in marketing. You may not be able to have expertise in in the fashion business, and you're facilitating that process of solving that problem which you've identified in the market space. But what's very critical in that process of identifying this information or resource asymmetries is also identifying who has got the problem. This is why you define your market or your target market or your customer whom you want to solve the problem for. So this brings me next to the concept of the customer. So when I'm thinking through the customer, I normally think through it in two aspects. First of all, there's customers who know that they have a problem in a particular domain or in a particular area. And there are people who do not know that they've got a problem in a particular area or in a particular domain. So if you look at customers who you know have got a problem, if you are say in the transport sector, for instance, so if you say you're you're an entrepreneur, you're looking at investing in the transport sector and you want to expand your fleet, of course you'll be able to have a number of problem sets, but what most likely will be dominant in that space would be the need to expand your fleet, would be the need for financing, to get the right kind of financing to be able to expand your fleet. So you definitely know that you've got a problem for long-term funding for you to be able to expand. So if there's a financing on the other end, that would be a potential target customers. There are examples here around tech entrepreneurship. There are clients, there are people who know that for their business, for their technology business to survive, they need an e-commerce gateway. They've got a need to accept and make payments. So those are people who have currently identified that they've got a need for a payment solution, a digital payment solutions, who then become and fulfill that population of people who know that they need a problem for, they need a solution which can facilitate their payments. And we can begin to target those as your initial population of people who can serve as your customers. So that customer base is actually a very good starting point, because they help in terms of validating and helping you innovate around your business ideas, because they essentially will be able to innovate with you in terms of building a product set and ensuring that it's got the right product market fit. Then there are people who don't know that they've got a problem, and this population of people who need to be shown what is possible with what is existing in the marketplace, or what is being offered by the technology, or what is being offered by the people within the ecosystem in which they operate in, to understand that they actually need certain products or solutions. So if you take an example of the iPhone, when the iPhone was launched, very few people across the globe knew that there's a need for a mobile internet. But immediately they started experiencing the mobile internet. We were all hooked on having a smartphone as a necessity. So you find that there will be, within your customer base, there will be people who know that they've got a problem, and they'll probably suggest it through their complaints or their suggestion across different media platforms. Those provide a good starting point to begin to validate your business idea. And there are people who don't know that they've got a problem. Those have to be shown in terms of what is possible for them to begin to engage on your product or solutions. So this idea has been explored by various researchers and authors. So one of them which stands out for me is the work by Everett Rogers, which was done in the 60s. It's around the idea of the diffusion of innovation, where you've got the innovators in a population who are forward-thinking, imagining a possible future which they want to create for themselves. Then you've got the early adopters. the early adopters who typically catch on an idea and be able to embrace it and run it as their own. And then it follows through the early majority, late majority, and the laggards. And there are statistics around how this plays out in the general population, where you find that the early innovators will only be about 2.5% of the population. So the early innovators will be guys who are trying to figure out how to use a blockchain to inform national identity, or to produce land titles, or to offer degrees at an university. So we find that it's a very small population of a larger sample. Then we've got the early adopters. So these are the guys who really catch on new trends and ideas and are willing to experiment and try things out. So typically these would form your initial core group of customers you want to identify early enough and target and engage, because they'll help you shape and validate and refine your business ideas. The rest of the population, you typically get very heavy backlash, and they're usually skeptics. They want to see somebody doing something before they can jump in and begin to say, yes, this idea or this business prospect or this product does solve my problem and is something I can trust and use. So that's the concept around my thoughts around the customer. So ideally, you should find people who typically know that they've got a problem, and you can identify and demonstrate to them that you've got a solution to meet their requirements. But the caveat there is you may not necessarily start with a total addressable market, but you target those people who are warm to the idea and are willing to experiment with you, grow with you, and test with you before you can achieve mass adoption and mass usage of your product or solution. Point number 3 is around the concept of competition. So with technology, of course, the world is flat. Barriers to entry in any industries are extremely low. Seemingly everybody's doing what everybody else is doing. And you do find that there's potential loss of cannibalization across various business lines, various industries, just in the aim of creating value for the customers. My position on competition is that, one, don't worry about competitors. When you've got a business idea, you're innovating around a problem which resonates with a particular set of the population or the market, the least party in that equation you should be worrying about is the competition. Here's why. Customers do choose who they'll trade and partner with. There's only so much you can do as an entrepreneur to shift people's perception. What you should be looking at is what share of the wallet of your target customers are they willing to spend on your product or solution. For instance, if you take if you're in the retail space, for instance, you take the population which is, say, living in Kablonga, and you've got a product and solution for the population of people living in Kablonga. What share of that person's income are they willing to spend on your product or service consistently throughout their life cycle? The same applies if you have got a product or solution for the people living in Mtendere, for instance, and you've got a solution which meets a particular need in that community. And you should be able to ask yourself, between someone paying rent, paying school fees, paying, buying food, what portion of their income are they willing to spend and commit to your product and solution? And if it so happens that there are many players trying to solve the same problem you're trying to solve, why should they choose you? So I think when you're looking at competition, the focus should be on aligning as much as possible to your customer needs and demonstrating value that if somebody earns that 100 kwacha at the end of the month, every month they're willing to commit 5%, 2%, 1% of that 100 kwacha to your product and solution for as long as possible over their entire life cycle. The reason why, and this is critical because in the marketplace where information is almost democratized, technology is enabling most people and businesses to come up with ideas, to innovate. There's also a high degree of people copying, potentially, or attempting to copy business ideas and business structures. So you need to be able to differentiate yourself by constantly ensuring that you are highly aligned to your customer demands and needs. The same applies if you are also serving the corporate space. Most big corporates have got multiple suppliers. Most big corporates do receive bids and proposals almost every other day, providing various solutions across the board. You need to ask yourself as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, in terms of what percentage of that corporate's budget would they be committing to the problem that you're trying to solve? And if there are many players in that space, why should they choose you? So when you're looking at competition, it's about refining the value you deliver to the customer and ensuring that you truly understand what your target customers really want, and always checking and adjusting your strategies to ensure that you are relevant and you're delivering value consistently. So that's on competition. So don't worry about competition. Worry about the portion of the budget that you'll be capturing of your target markets. And if there are many players in that space, why should they choose you? That's a key thing to take around competition. If you can address that and you can demonstrate that at any one point when somebody is making a decision to hire a marketing agency, to hire somebody to advise them in the space of fashion, to bring on somebody on board who can help them figure out how to make digital payments, your name should come on tops, and then you know that you're delivering value and you're guaranteeing success. Point number 4 is around capability. So I'm glad to hear that some of the entrepreneurs participating in this discussion do have a regional play, which is great. And I think most of the Zambian and some of the African entrepreneurs normally really focus on the local markets. That's not to say that local markets are not valuable, but they are truly valuable in terms of when you're starting out and trying to validate your business idea and refine your business model. You always have to start local. It's easier. You know the people. They understand you. They understand the language. But we should always be looking to expand beyond your local market, in this case Zambia, beyond Africa, in terms of what your growth aspirations should be. And in that, you should critically think about your capabilities. We find that in my experience dealing with entrepreneurs, dealing with SMEs, this is one area which I think most people lack, and most people don't invest sufficient time and effort in thinking around how do you build capabilities which can scale and which can be sustained over time. So currently, we've got technology which is emerging, which is fairly accessible and cheap. How do you leverage technology to expand your business? Technology is both an enabler and also a multiplier, in the sense that you can access global markets from the comfort of your living room. You can connect to various supply chains and value systems. You need to begin to think around building a technology which can allow you not just to serve the local markets, but allow you to expand and scale sustainably. Okay, I've just seen a question if I've got some slides. No, I don't have some slides, but I can share some slides later on. So we can use technology now to multiply your business, to expand your impact and influence beyond your local markets. And if you look at the effect of COVID-19, it has really demonstrated how technology can enable businesses which were traditionally not thought of as technology-led businesses to become now technology-led businesses. So currently, most schools are moving their lessons onto digital platforms. Who thought teachers will be and schools will be driving the digital transformation in the era of education? So technology is a multiplier and an enabler, and you should be able to you should be critically thinking around how you invest in the right technology platforms to enable you to not only grow your business but also scale sustainably. The other piece is around your business construct. So how do you define your business architecture? That's key in terms of defining how you scale and sustain the business. Which components of your business are you going to source internally in terms of grow internal capabilities? Which parts of your business are you going to outsource to other players? So if you look at in the technology space, the story of Apple and Microsoft in the early 80s. So you saw Microsoft take on a software route where they were deliberate around enabling businesses through software to grow and scale, while Apple took a direction which combined software and hardware to produce a product which is self-contained. Those are decisions which any entrepreneur will have to make. If you're going to run a creative agency, which components of your business are you going to outsource? Which capabilities are you going to build internally? And they've got vast implications in terms of how you succeed and fail. Then lastly, around capabilities is how do you monetize your business idea? The business idea can make sense across multiple dimensions, but if you cannot monetize your business idea, generate revenues and margins which can allow you to invest in the next phase of growth, it will be very difficult to grow and expand. And that's where the language of accounting and finance come into play, because that's when now everything converges. Once you've come up with the business idea, you've identified your customers, your target customers, you've managed to run ahead of your competition. Ultimately, you need to monetize your business idea. And for you to know how you're monetizing your business idea, you need to build a strong accounting and finance infrastructure behind that to be able to know how you're succeeding across, how you're succeeding and executing across your strategy. And there are various models which you can use to measure this. If you look at the literature around a lean startup methodology, there's innovation accounting which you can use to know how new ideas are contributing to the bottom line. There's a concept around the blitz scaling, which was promoted by Reid Hoffman, one of the founders of LinkedIn, around identifying critical points within your journey when you can now push more resources into your business to scale. But all these, you won't be able to make those critical decisions unless you've got a strong understanding of how the numbers are stacking up, both from the financing as well as operational side, to be able to know if you're really achieving your strategic goals. So that's on point number 4, capabilities. Is around technology that you invest in, that you build. Identify those technology solutions. Technology is now cheap, extremely cheap, and then decide which capabilities you are going to build internally and which capabilities you're going to source from external parties, and then also measure and track how you monetize your business idea, and identify those trigger points when you can now begin to accelerate the speed at which you scale. All right, so that's point number 4. The last point is around essentially the financing aspects of the business. And I'll just cover some of the ideas around how venture capital works in different markets, how banking finance works, especially in markets like ours in Zambia, and how you can potentially look at trade credit, but looking at trade credit with caution as a financing mechanism. So when you look at financing at a global stage, because we're exposed to these case studies and stories, you find that most startups and new ideas are either one funded by friends, family, and out of your own pocket, which is the original form of funding a business idea. But in most markets and more developed economies, you find that there are communities of venture funds and angel investors who normally fund business ideas. I think in our markets and parts of the world, that concept is not yet developed or it's not yet mature, whereby you can find a good population of venture investors who can invest in new startups and companies. What I know is that in Cape Town, there's an ecosystem of venture investors and angel investors who do finance and fund ideas. So that's one of the mature markets in Africa. And Nigeria is also quite mature in that space, where you can find a strong venture capital and angel investor ecosystem. Kenya is also emerging. In Zambia, there are a few venture capital funds and angel investors, but the ecosystem is not that big. It's one of the sources of financing, and the advantage is that this type of financing is what can be termed as patient capital, in the sense that it's longer term, and you don't have to repay it on demand. It can allow you to build your business idea, validate your business case, manage some of the market shocks which you may face as you grow your business, and still be there to sustain you up to the time where you can begin to turn a profit and begin to scale. But in this part of the world, if I look at the sub-region, apart from South Africa, parts of West Africa, Nigeria, parts of Ghana and Kenya, venture capital is one of the gaps that we've got in the market. It is there, but it's very hard to find. Then we've got banking finance, which is very common in these parts of the market. So banks do actually invest in a lot of SMEs and startup ideas in the continent, and they're the biggest source of funding. But banks also do have a problem on their hands, in the sense that banks are usually financed by customer deposits, which they transform into loans, and those customer deposits have to be paid back on demand. Imagine if you went to a bank today and you wanted to withdraw 100,000 kwacha, and the bank told you that, Chief or Madam, you can't withdraw 100,000 kwacha because we lent it out to Mr. Francis and is yet to pay. Guess what? You never put your money back into that bank again. So when banks are writing credit, they do take a rather stringent approach to extending loans, and it's not very patient capital, particularly if you look at startups and SMEs. And there's an approach which banks use to determine whether to lend to somebody or not. So I'm going to give you some trade secrets. So if you've got a pen and paper, you can write this down. There's an acronym called CAMPARI. It starts with CAMPARI. So any credit manager, any portfolio manager within the bank, this is what they use when looking at your loan application. The first point they look at is your character. Are you trustworthy? Because yes, banks are getting deposits from people who've got excess funds. They're getting those deposits because they are trusted. So it just makes sense that when you're extending a loan, you want to extend to somebody whom you can trust. So character is a key component in the lending decision. And some of the things that banks use to determine character is they look at credit reference bureaus, they look at the history of your company, they look at your track record to inform that character has character based. The next piece on the acronym CAMPARI is ability. You've got good character, but are you able to pay? So the idea goes back to monetizing your business case. So you analyze your financial statements, look at your growth path. How have you been growing? Within the business idea, what's your path to profitability if you're not making any profit? What profit margins are you running? What cash flows do you have? And what cash flows are you projecting? So that will inform whether you're considered for credit or not. Then M refers to the means. Are you an expert in the in the chosen field. It always helps to have domain expertise. If you're going to go into the media space, do you have appropriate training within that area of media and marketing, or do you have a team which is supporting you to succeed in that space? So means becomes critical. Purpose, why you invest, why you're asking for the money, what are you investing in? Is that an area which can accelerate the growth of the business? Of course, it talks to the amount. How much are you going to put on your balance sheet? Are you overextending yourself in terms of the borrowing? Are you going to tip your balance sheet over in such that you've got a sustainable level of debt? So there are tools and measures which banks use to evaluate whether the debt levels are sustainable. And there are accounting principles which are applied in this space, which you can also test on business before you actually even engage a financier to see if they'll consider you for additional borrowing. Then around repayment is around your cash flows and your margins that you're generating as a business. If you've got cash flows which come on a quarterly basis, you may want to sort of apply for funding which also requires you to pay on a quarterly basis. If you've got cash flows which come in on a daily basis, you also want to apply for a funding line which also models the inflows that are coming in. So banks will look at your cash flows versus your repayment commitments to see if you are good for credit. And lastly is around insurance. So what protection are you putting around your business to ensure that it's sustainable? So it could be pure play insurance policies that you've put around your assets and your business, or it could be other potential business lines that you can pivot into if your traditional business were adversely affected. Now we're experiencing the impact of COVID. Most of us are seeing stress on our business lines. Can we quickly pivot to another line where your domain expertise can be applied with reduced risk and be able to generate funds and revenues to meet your obligations? So when you're looking at banking finance, that's the model or thought process which is applied. Other forms of credit, of course, you can get trade credit from your suppliers if you're in the manufacturing or you've got a system. There are structures like if you're looking at international trade, letters of credit which allow you at least relief where you get your inputs before you actually make good your payments. But trade credit should be taken prudently, because we don't want to damage your reputation within the market space as somebody who doesn't pay their creditors and begins to character if you want to expand to much more professional sources of finance. So in closing, what I would like to say that two things. One, only you can execute against your business idea the best. Nobody else can do it better than you. And the fact that you've launched out to build a business, it means that, one, you've identified people whose thoughts are around what problems need to be solved resonate with your vision of the world. Those people are willing to trust you with their insights and information and their business, so which is great. Which means we've got a business, you've got a market, and the fact that you identify some people who are willing to do business with you. Guess what? There's a high likelihood that there are more people like that out there in the market. It's just a question of working hard to discover them and possibly show them what's possible in the future. In terms of competitors, again, here, focus on perfecting your product or solution and correctly aligning it with your market. Ensure that you've got a finger on the pulse in terms of how the expectations are changing. Aim to meet the expectations, but aim to surprise and exceed their expectations. It will be good. I'm an accounting background. It would be good to have an accounting platform which also allows me to do e-commerce. What should I jump from organization? And of course, on financing, choose a financing structure that meets your business requirements. Yes, in sub-Saharan Africa, we've got challenges around venture capital and angel funding. But if you have to use banking finance, take into account the Campari and make sure that banking finance helps your business grow instead of stifles your ability to grow and expand your business. Then lastly is around purpose. You should always remember why you're doing what you're doing. And that goes beyond profits, and that goes beyond generating money. But for now, I think with the technology which has been enabled, and if you look at the number of challenges that us as Africans have to solve, those challenges, those information and resource asymmetries can only be solved by entrepreneurs and innovators who are building businesses around the problems that we face. Currently, we've got relatives who live in rural areas. How are they getting access to income? How are they getting access to electricity? How are they getting money? How are they buying with COVID in place? All those are business areas that we can explore and build. And beyond technology, I think for the past 5 years, most people have been obsessed with building technology companies, building an app. Your idea doesn't have to be an app. That the cleaning bit that give the right circumstance. There are basic areas that you
apologies, team, but nonetheless, Mr. Mumbi, I wish to say thank you for this presentation. I am lost for words. Really, I am speechless. I feel this presentation was eye-opening, because this is why they use it, because these are things that I feel every startup should be privy to. Every startup should at least know about this. I mean, I wish to echo your earlier sentiments, where you made mention that as a startup, then or start before on the competitors, but rather focus more on the customers. So at this point, I would like to invite any questions. I think I had seen a question. Find out some.
Hello. I think we have some problem with our connectivity this side. But the question was, Mr. Mumbi, are you there?
I'm still here. Thank you.
Yeah. So the question was, how best can we unlock domestic capital, like into the startup ecosystem? I think as a person who is into, like you're an expert in venture capital, you understand that for a startup to attract like foreign, like direct investment, some investment from outside it's not an easy way to to reach that level. What we wanted to know is, how can startups unlock domestic capital, meaning kwacha? How can startups, local startups, access local currency, so that it helps them maybe to build their solutions to such a time where they can be able to appeal to to venture capital. So I don't know, what's your comment on that?
Yeah. So I think there are two things. One thing we shouldn't shy away from is then also to expose Africa to the world. I think for those of us who've got an opportunity to participate at and engage with stakeholders at a global level, is one, how do we then connect some of the local startups and partnerships to those global sources of patient funding? For me, that's one. And for me, that's a passion of mine, to see how we can make those connections possible. So that's one area we can look at. It's not easy, but we should always strive to find ways and means of connecting African entrepreneurs to global sources of funding, which in most cases comes in at a cheaper rate than local funding, and in some cases it's much more patient than local funding. That's one. Now, in terms of unlocking local investors, I think it's around one, us partnering in a strategic manner. So, for instance, we've got 18 people in this chat, and we're all coming with different domain expertise. How do we partner and then begin to create value? I think if you look at ecosystems which have grown and evolved, it's identifying each other's strengths and beginning to invest in those strengths. So if Imanga has got a strong marketing play, and I'm struggling with a business idea which needs to be properly marketed and managed across social media platforms, why don't I give Imanga business? Because the best source of funding you can get is somebody actually buying your product or solutions and trusting you over time. And I think once we begin to demonstrate that value and trade with each other, then we can begin to attract other funding to enter into our ecosystem. So for me, I think one is leveraging the partnerships, building trust across the network. That's why I was very keen on saying use of trade credit, because that's where most of us lose trust. Somebody supplies you goods and services, you don't pay them, then they don't pay their staff. That just destroys the trust of the ecosystem and how entrepreneurs and startups are looked at by those people who are the late majority and the early majorities, who are willing to see how your business idea will succeed or fail before they jump in. So I think it's a call to arms to engage and partner in a strategic manner, build trust in the ecosystem, and then we can begin to attract more funding. And I don't have all the answers, but based on my engagements with various stakeholders, that's what really stands out. But most importantly, for all of us who are connected to global ecosystem or regional ecosystems, how do we bring that funding and thinking into the local ecosystem? But it's a long-term play. It's not going to happen in a day. It will take us demonstrating that we're actually creating value, not just for our local markets, but value which can be exported across the region and across the globe.
Thank you so much, Mumbi. So I have a question here from someone who's trying to find out. So they're trying to refer you to a point that you earlier on brought up about clients and customers, to say there are those that know that they have a problem, while there are those that do not know. So then this person is trying to find out to say, what if their idea is primarily premised on passion? This person doesn't even know if this idea has got market really. All that they know is that they are passionate about this and they want to pursue it and make money out of this. What would be your word of advice to them and how they go about it?
Yeah, I think it's great. So let's take a good example. Let's look at games, video games, right? In the 80s when we were growing up, okay, I couldn't afford a video game, but I had friends who had video games. Those guys were crazy and passionate about video games. It was just a passion in the 80s and early 90s. Now it's growing into a multi-million-dollar business as electronic sports. So 20 years later, a passion is now turning into big business ideas. And I think that falls into if you remember my point around the diffusion of innovation. as done by Everett Rogers. Those guys who are just passionate about something, those are the 2.5%. They just want to do something because they are passionate about it, and because they believe so much in what they're doing. The most important thing is for you now to do the legwork and identify like-minded people. So if you are passionate about collecting stamps, try to find people who are also passionate about collecting stamps, and now build communities around collecting stamps. And over time, as that ecosystem grows, you can now try to turn it into a business of people who are now willing to pay for rare stamps which somebody holds. Then you begin to monetize your idea and begin to grow your ecosystem. So I think if you've just got a passion and you can't find other people who share your passion, then it's just a hobby. But until you can build a community of like-minded people, it's just a hobby. So if you want to turn it into monetize your passion, find like-minded people, build a community, and then begin to grow and generate value from there. Otherwise, it's just a hobby, and it's something that you do in the pastime. So the video games is a good case study where a passion turned into an idea for people who actually play video games. Not the guys who make video games, but the people who play video games.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions to Mr. Mumbi? Okay, so Milu, any remarks from you?
No, I think it was a really interesting session. Stephen actually invited me, like, oh, jump on and have a listen to what is being said. And I think it's definitely been a really interesting session, but no questions from my end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milu. So next week we were supposed to have another startup Converse, but we are not going. But we are going to have a Converse, but this time around in the form of our anniversary celebration as NyamukAfrica, because we'll be celebrating 1 year of existence. And at this point, I wish to acknowledge Mr. Julius, who is present here. You see, Julius is the co-founder and general manager of Impact Hub. And I must make mention that that is a place where we as NyamukAfrica was born really as an idea, and with time we have managed to grow. So Julius, any words, any remarks from you?
Thank you very much, Joseph, for extending the invitation and also for being around and part of our ecosystem. It's been a good 1 year. It's funny that it's 1 year already. No, time passes very fast. And I've been following throughout the conversation, and I enjoyed Mr. Mumbi's presentation. Brought out quite a lot of key points, especially around the ecosystem, because there are certain things which we take for granted in understanding or just analyzing the Zambian ecosystem as far as entrepreneurship is concerned, or innovation in general. And he touched base on some of the key points, like the challenges and opportunities, and also areas where we can explore more if we are to stand out as African ecosystems or entrepreneurs, like announcing ourselves to the world. I think that's a good thing which came out very well. And as a member of a network that works in this space, seeing our network grow like this, it gives us the confidence and the hope that even us in the next few months or years, we are going to create something very good. Look at where we are, where we were yourselves, and Impact, of course, last year around this time, but we've grown over the time, and we now have a few entrepreneurs in our network, or we've created a mini ecosystem. So appreciate your efforts that you're doing as NyamukAfrica, and I hope we continue working together and see what we can achieve. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Julius Luwaya. We appreciate the time spent with us here. So with no questions, I think we'll be ending shortly. But just before we end, I would just kindly ask that we turn on our videos and just say our bye-byes in a good way.
And let's take a photo. Let's take a group photo.
Exactly. Let's take a group photo.
Let's take a group photo, team. Please, camera on.
Kindly turn on your videos. Let's take a group photo.
Wonderful.
Beautiful, beautiful. Still waiting for the others. Aka, Malama, Luyando. Alrighty, so everybody just say cheers.
I'm in the door.
Alrighty, so thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for having my time. We appreciate your sacrifice spent here. So have a blessed weekend. God bless.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we can have our finger food on our way out. And let us
Thank you and bye.
Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. That's okay. We'll just end it, right?